Dominic Vale built an empire on fear, blood, and absolute control. For 8 years, he ruled the underworld with an iron fist while his quiet wife existed in the shadows of his mansion. Invisible, silent, irrelevant, or so he thought. 21 missed calls. That's all it took to shatter everything. Because when the calls finally stopped, when the silence settled like death itself, Dominic discovered a truth that would destroy him. The woman he ignored wasn't just his wife. She was the architect of everything he owned, and she'd just walked away with the keys to his entire world. Want to see how the most powerful man in the city loses everything to the woman he never saw coming? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The phone vibrated against the marble nightstand for the 21st time. Dominic Vale didn't even glance at it. He lay sprawled across Egyptian cotton sheets in the penthouse suite of the Grandeur Hotel, one arm draped across Simone's bare shoulders, the other holding a glass of scotch that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The city glittered below them through floor-to-ceiling windows, a kingdom of lights that bent to his will, that trembled at his name. Simone traced lazy circles on his chest, her red nails like bloodstains against his skin. "That's the 5th time in an hour," she murmured, her voice thick with amusement. "Persistent little thing, isn't she?" Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Don't." "What?" Simone propped herself up on one elbow, dark hair cascading over her shoulders. Her smile was sharp, knowing. "I'm just saying, most women would have given up by now, but not your sweet, devoted wife." She drew out the last word like it was a joke they were both in on. The phone stopped vibrating, started again. 22. "She's probably worried," Simone continued, running one finger along the edge of his jawline. "Sitting in that big empty house, wondering where her husband is, wondering who he's with." She laughed, a sound like champagne bubbles, effervescent and empty. "Poor thing probably has dinner waiting. Does she still do that? Set a place for you even when you don't come home?" Dominic set his glass down with more force than necessary. "Simone." "What?" "It's sweet." She nestled back against him, apparently oblivious to the warning in his tone. In a pathetic sort of way. The phone went silent. 22 calls, and then nothing. Dominic told himself he didn't notice. Told himself it didn't matter. Elena had been calling him for 8 years. 8 years of unanswered phones, ignored texts, forgotten anniversaries. She'd learned long ago not to expect responses. This was just another night, another absence in a marriage built on the foundation of his indifference and her acceptance. Except Elena had never called 22 times before. She'd never called more than once. "Room service should be here soon," Simone said, already reaching for the hotel phone. "I'm thinking lobster. And maybe that chocolate thing they do, what's it called? The one with the gold leaf?" Dominic's phone sat dark and silent on the nightstand. The absence of vibration felt somehow louder than its presence had been. "Dominic?" Simone waved a hand in front of his face. "Are you even listening to me?" "Order whatever you want," he said automatically. His mind was elsewhere now, caught on a detail he couldn't quite name. Elena didn't panic. Elena didn't chase. In 8 years of marriage, she'd perfected the art of existing around him, present but not demanding, there but not imposing. She managed his household with the efficiency of a 5-star hotel, kept his legitimate business affairs running smoothly, and asked for nothing in return except the empty title of Mrs. Vale. She'd certainly never called him 22 times in a row. "You're thinking about her." Simone's voice had gone cold. "I'm not." "You are." She sat up fully now, the sheet falling away. "I can always tell. You get this look, like you're trying to solve a puzzle that doesn't have enough pieces." "There's no puzzle," Dominic said, but his eyes drifted back to the phone. Still dark, still silent. The silence felt wrong. Simone followed his gaze and something ugly flickered across her face. "You want to call her back?" "I don't." "Then why are you staring at it?" "I'm not—" Dominic stopped himself, recognizing the trap. This was what Simone did, pushed and prodded until she got a reaction, any reaction, just to prove she could. He'd found it exciting once, that constant need for his attention. Now it just exhausted him. She's your wife, Simone said, investing the word with contempt. Not your mother. She doesn't need to know where you are every second of every day. She doesn't ask where I am. Exactly. Simone reached for her own drink. So why start caring now? Why indeed? Dominic swung his legs out of bed, suddenly restless. He walked to the window, looked down at the city that feared his name. Out there, in the darkness, his empire spread like roots through concrete. Nightclubs and construction sites, shipping yards and political offices, legitimate businesses that laundered dirty money and dirty money that funded legitimate businesses. All of it running smoothly, all of it under his control. And at the center of it all, in the mansion on Blackwood Drive, sat Elena. Elena, who managed his calendar. Elena, who handled his correspondence. Elena, who somehow always knew which politician needed courting, which judge needed paying, which business associate was getting too ambitious. Elena, who had just called him 22 times and then stopped. I need to make a call, Dominic said. Are you serious right now? Simone's voice pitched upward. We finally have a night together, a whole night, not just a few hours. And you're going to spend it worrying about her? I'm not worrying about her, What? Checking in? Making sure the little wife isn't too lonely? Simone threw back the covers, suddenly furious. Do you have any idea how insulting this is? I'm right here, Dominic, right here, and you can't stop thinking about a woman you barely acknowledge exists. That's not— Just go, Simone snapped. Call her. Go home to her. Whatever. I don't care anymore. But she did care, obviously. Simone always cared, always needed, always demanded. It was exhausting in a way Elena had never been. Dominic picked up his phone. Still no new calls, no messages, no frantic follow-ups, just silence where there had been persistence. He pulled up Elena's contact, a number he'd saved 8 years ago and rarely used, and hesitated. What would he even say? Sorry I ignored your 22 calls while I was in bed with another woman. Sorry I've been ignoring you for 8 years straight. His thumb hovered over the call button. Oh, this is pathetic, Simone said from the bed. You can't even decide whether to call your own wife. Dominic pressed dial. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Elena always answered on the first ring. Always. It was one of those things about her he'd come to expect, that immediate, quiet availability. Elena answered his calls, managed his schedule, ran his household, and asked for nothing in return except the privilege of continuing to do so. 4 rings, 5. Maybe she's asleep, Simone offered, voice dripping with false sweetness. It is after midnight. 6 rings, 7. Elena never slept before he came home. He knew this because sometimes he'd return at 3, 4 in the morning, and she'd be in her study, light still on, papers spread across her desk. Always working, always available. 8 rings. Voicemail. Dominic ended the call without leaving a message. Immediately dialed again. Same result. 8 rings, voicemail, silence. Maybe she dropped her phone in the toilet, Simone suggested. Or maybe, and here's a crazy thought, maybe she's finally gotten tired of waiting around for a husband who doesn't give a damn about her. Dominic tried a 3rd time. Same 8 rings, same voicemail, same empty silence. Something cold settled in his chest. I need to go home, he heard himself say. You're joking. I need to— It's 1 in the morning, Dominic, 1 in the morning. She's probably just asleep or ignoring you, which would be fair, honestly. But Elena didn't ignore calls. Elena didn't sleep until he was home. Elena didn't call 22 times and then disappear into silence. Dominic was already reaching for his clothes. This is unbelievable, Simone said, watching him dress with wide, angry eyes. You're actually leaving. You're actually leaving me here to go check on a woman who's been a ghost in your life for 8 years. I'll call you tomorrow. Don't bother. Dominic didn't respond. He was already halfway to the door, phone in hand, trying Elena's number one more time. Still voicemail. Still silence. The elevator ride down felt like it took hours. His driver, Marcus, was waiting by the car, reading something on his phone with the patient boredom of a man used to waiting. Home, Dominic said, sliding into the back seat. Marcus glanced at him in the rearview mirror, clearly surprised. Dominic never went home before dawn when he was with Simone. Everything all right, boss? Just drive. The city slid past in streaks of neon and shadow. Dominic tried Elena's number twice more. Voicemail. Voicemail. The silence was starting to feel like a presence, heavy and ominous, like storm clouds gathering. Try the house line, he told Marcus. Sir? The house. Call the house line. Marcus did, putting it on speaker. It rang and rang and rang. No one picked up. There's staff there, Dominic said, more to himself than Marcus. There's always staff. Someone should answer. Want me to call Mrs. Chen? Marcus offered. Mrs. Chen was the head housekeeper, a woman who'd been with the household for 6 years. Do it, Marcus dialed. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Hello? Mrs. Chen, this is Marcus. Is Mrs. Vale at home? There was a pause. A long pause. I don't know, sir. What do you mean you don't know? I mean, I'm not at the house right now. Mrs. Vale gave us all the night off, all of us. Said something about deep cleaning in the morning, told us to come in at noon instead of 8. Dominic felt something shift in his chest. She gave everyone the night off? Yes, sir. Is something wrong? When did she do this? This afternoon. Around 3, I think. She seemed... Mrs. Chen hesitated. She seemed very calm about it, very organized, like she'd been planning it. Dominic ended the call. Drive faster. Marcus pressed the accelerator. The city gave way to suburbs to the exclusive estates where men like Dominic kept their families locked away from the ugliness of their real lives. Trees lined the road now, thick and dark, blocking out the moon. The mansion came into view like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and iron, walls and gates, security cameras and motion sensors. Home. Prison. Monument to wealth earned in blood. The gates were open. The gates were never open. Boss, Marcus said carefully. I see it. They drove through, gravel crunching under the tires. The house loomed ahead, dark except for the porch lights. No glow from Elena's study. No light in the bedroom windows. Just darkness and silence. Marcus stopped the car in the circular driveway. Dominic was out before the engine fully shut off, taking the front steps 2 at a time. The door was unlocked. The door was never unlocked. He pushed it open and stepped into absolute silence. No hum of the security system, no distant sound of staff moving through the house, no presence of any kind. Elena? His voice echoed in the foyer. Nothing. Dominic flipped on lights as he moved through the house. The main living room, empty and pristine. The dining room, table bare, chairs perfectly aligned. The kitchen, spotless, nothing out of place. He took the stairs to the 2nd floor. Elena? Their bedroom, his bedroom really, since Elena had moved to a guest room 3 years ago, was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Bed made, curtains drawn, his cologne on the dresser. He walked down the hall to Elena's room. The door was ajar. Dominic pushed it fully open and froze. The room was empty. Not empty like she'd stepped out. Empty like she'd never been there. The bed was stripped down to the mattress. The closet doors hung open, revealing bare hangers. The dresser drawers sat pulled out, completely vacant. No clothes. No shoes. No jewelry box. No photographs. Nothing. Dominic stood in the doorway, trying to process what he was seeing. This wasn't someone leaving in a hurry. This was surgical. This was planned. He moved to her study down the hall. The room where Elena spent most of her time, where she managed his calendar and correspondence, where she worked late into the night on things he'd never bothered to ask about. Empty, desk cleared, filing cabinets open and bare, bookshelves vacant. The only thing remaining was a wall calendar, and every single date for the next 3 months had been X'd out in red marker. Dominic's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't look for me. His hands shook as he typed back. Where are you? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Somewhere you'll never find me. Somewhere I should have gone 8 years ago. Elena, what is this? This is me leaving. This is me choosing myself. This is what 8 years of silence looks like when it finally finds its voice. Come home. We can talk about this. The response came immediately. I was home. For 8 years, I was home. You were the one who was never there. Dominic moved through the house like a man searching for evidence of his own existence. Every room Elena had occupied was empty. Every space she'd filled was now void. Even the small touches, the flowers she kept in the front room, the books she left on the side tables, the way she arranged throw pillows on the couch, all of it gone. She'd erased herself completely. His phone rang. Not Elena, a blocked number. He answered. Mr. Vale? A man's voice, professional and cold. This is First National Bank. There's been some activity on your accounts we need to discuss. What kind of activity? We're showing several large transfers made this afternoon. We wanted to verify they were authorized. Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. What transfers? Approximately $40 million moved across 6 accounts, all authorized with proper security clearances and passwords. We just wanted to confirm I didn't authorize any transfers. Silence on the other end. Then, sir, these transfers required both account access and security credentials that only you and one other authorized party would have. Elena, I need those transfers reversed, now. I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. The funds were transferred to offshore accounts with tight security protocols. The receiving banks have strict policies about, I don't care about their policies. That's my money. Actually, sir, the banker's voice went carefully neutral. According to our records, Mrs. Vale is listed as a co-owner on these accounts, has been since they were opened. She had every legal right to. Dominic ended the call. Immediately dialed his lawyer, Thomas Harrigan, a man who'd kept Dominic out of prison more times than either of them could count. Dominic, do you know what time it is? I need you to freeze all my accounts. Everything. Every bank, every asset, everything. What? Why? Elena's taken money, a lot of money. I need everything locked down until… Dominic. Thomas's voice had gone very quiet. I can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? I mean, I tried to call you 6 times tonight. I mean, I've been attempting to reach you for hours. I mean, Elena was in my office this afternoon with paperwork that suggests she's been preparing for this for a very long time. The cold in Dominic's chest spread outward. What paperwork? Financial documents, account access forms, legal authorizations. Dominic, she's been a co-signer on almost everything you own. I never questioned it because you had me set it up that way 8 years ago. You said she needed access to manage household expenses, and how much can she access? Thomas exhaled slowly. Based on what I'm seeing, almost everything. The houses are in your name, but the accounts, the investments, the offshore holdings, she has legal access to about 80% of your liquid assets. Dominic's vision blurred at the edges. She can't just take it. Actually, she can. And from what I'm seeing on my end, she already has. I'm getting notifications from banks, investment firms, property managers. Dominic, she's been moving money all day. Small amounts from each account, nothing large enough to trigger automatic fraud alerts. But it adds up to… how much? I won't know the full extent until morning, but preliminary numbers suggest somewhere in the range of 90 to 100 million. The phone slipped from Dominic's hand, clattered to the floor. $100 million. Gone. He picked up the phone with shaking hands. Find her. I've already got people looking, but Dominic, she's smart. Whatever she's planned, she's been planning it for a long time. The offshore accounts are in jurisdictions that don't cooperate with U.S. investigations. The paper trail is sophisticated enough that it would take months to untangle, if we even can. I don't have months. Then you'd better figure out what else she has access to, Thomas said quietly, because if she took the money, she probably took other things too. Dominic ended the call, stood in the empty study, looked at the calendar with its red X's marking off the future like days crossed out of a prison sentence. His phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You're probably noticing things are missing. Money, files, access. It's remarkable what a person can accomplish when they're invisible, when no one pays attention, when everyone assumes you're just the quiet wife who doesn't matter. Elena, this isn't funny. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be final. You can't just take my money and disappear. Our money, our accounts, our empire. Or did you forget that you made me a co-owner of almost everything you built? Did you forget because I was so invisible you stopped seeing me as a person at all? Dominic's jaw clenched. Where are you? Does it matter? You never cared where I was before. I'm giving you one chance to fix this. Bring back the money. Come home. We'll forget this happened. The response took longer this time. When it came, it was just 4 words. There is no home. Then, a minute later, another message. By the way, you should check your office. Downtown. The one you think is so secure. Dominic was already moving, already calling Marcus, already running down the stairs. They made the drive to his downtown office in 20 minutes. A drive that should have taken 40. Marcus ran 2 red lights and didn't slow down for either. The building rose 30 stories above the financial district, all glass and steel and modern architecture. Vale Enterprises occupied the top 5 floors, legitimate businesses that made legitimate money and provided a legitimate front for everything else Dominic did. The lobby security guard looked up in surprise as Dominic burst through the doors. Mr. Vale? Sir, I wasn't expecting my office, now. They rode the elevator in silence. Dominic's reflection stared back at him from the polished brass doors. A man in expensive clothes with expensive problems. A man who'd built an empire and never noticed the foundation crumbling beneath his feet. The executive floor was dark except for emergency lighting. Dominic's office sat at the far end, behind double doors of imported mahogany, overlooking the city he'd conquered. The doors were unlocked. Everything was gone. Not the furniture, that remained. But the files, the computers, the documents, the hard drives, all of it vanished. His desk drawers hung open and empty. The filing cabinet sat bare. Even the safe behind the painting was open, door ajar, interior void. Dominic walked to his desk like a man in a dream. In the center, perfectly aligned, sat a single piece of paper. He picked it up with trembling hands. Dear Dominic, by now you've probably noticed that I've taken some things. Money, files, access codes, security clearances, the keys to every kingdom you thought you built alone. You're probably angry, probably confused, probably wondering how your quiet, invisible wife managed to dismantle your empire in a single afternoon. The answer is simple. I didn't dismantle it in an afternoon. I've been dismantling it for 8 years. Every day you ignored me. Every night you didn't come home. Every moment you treated me like furniture instead of a person. I was working, planning, preparing. You gave me access because I was convenient, because I managed things you didn't want to bother with, because I was invisible enough that you stopped questioning what I was doing, stopped monitoring what I could see, stopped caring what I knew. You gave me the keys to your kingdom because you never imagined I'd use them. That was your first mistake. Your second was thinking you could treat someone like a ghost for 8 years and never face consequences. The money is gone. The files are gone. The digital trails are gone. I took everything that mattered and left everything that didn't. The empire you're standing in right now, it's a shell, a facade, a beautiful, expensive, empty nothing. Don't look for me. You won't find me. Don't try to undo this. You can't. Don't expect mercy. I learned from the best, and you taught me that mercy is weakness. You ignored 22 calls tonight, Dominic. 22 chances to stop this before it started. 22 moments where you could have chosen differently, but you didn't. And now the only thing you're going to hear from me is silence. E. Dominic read the letter 3 times, 4 times, 5. His phone rang. Not Elena this time. A number he recognized. Victor Russo, his second in command, the man who handled the illegal side of operations while Dominic maintained plausible deniability in the legitimate world. We've got a problem, Victor said without preamble. I know. No, you don't. The shipment that was supposed to arrive tonight, it's gone. The warehouse where we store the product, emptied. The trucks we use for transport, impounded. And the cops who we pay to look the other way? They're suddenly developing consciences. Dominic closed his eyes. How is that possible? I don't know, but it gets worse. The files we keep on all our political connections, all the judges and cops and city officials we've been paying off for years. Someone leaked them. I'm getting calls from people I haven't talked to in months, all of them panicking, all of them cutting ties. Who leaked them? I don't know, but whoever did it knew exactly where everything was kept. Knew every password, every security protocol, every... Victor stopped. Oh, hell. What? The files. The organization system. The way everything was cataloged and cross-referenced. That was never you, boss. That was never your style. Elena, Dominic whispered. Your wife? Your wife had access to the dirty files? She had access to everything. The admission felt like broken glass in his throat. I gave her access to everything because I needed someone to manage it, and I didn't want to bother. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then, how long has she been planning this? I don't know. What does she want? I don't know that either. We'll figure it out, because right now we've got the Russians looking to move in on our territory, the Italians asking questions about our operation, and the Irish wondering if we're weak enough to take down. If word gets out that we've been compromised, word won't get out. It already is. I've got 3 different families asking me if the rumors are true, if you've lost control, if the Vale Empire is falling apart. Tell them... Dominic stopped. Tell them what? That his wife had systematically dismantled his operation? That the woman he'd ignored for 8 years had been the architect holding everything together? Tell them we're handling it. Are we? Dominic looked around his empty office, looked at the letter still clutched in his hand, looked out at the city that suddenly felt less like a kingdom and more like a grave. I'll call you back, he said, and ended the call. For a long time, he just stood there. Outside, the city glittered with life. Cars on streets, lights in windows, people living their small, uncomplicated lives. People who didn't build empires on blood. People who didn't ignore their wives until those wives decided to burn everything down. His phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number. Still think I'm just the quiet wife who doesn't matter? Dominic typed back with shaking hands. What do you want? The response came immediately. I wanted you to notice me. I wanted you to care. I wanted 8 years of marriage to mean something more than a convenient arrangement. But you never noticed. You never cared. And now it's too late. What do you want from me now? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, I want you to understand what it feels like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated like you don't matter. I want you to feel what I felt for 8 years, and then I want you to live with it, forever. The dots disappeared. No more messages came. Dominic tried calling the number. It went straight to an automated message. This number is no longer in service. He tried texting. Message failed to send. She was gone. Dominic walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the cold glass. Below, the city continued its indifferent existence. Above, the sky was starting to lighten with the approach of dawn. Somewhere out there, Elena was watching, waiting, probably laughing at how easily she'd dismantled the empire he'd thought was unshakable. And Dominic realized, with a clarity that felt like a knife between his ribs, that he had no idea how to fight an enemy he'd never bothered to see. His phone rang again. A number he didn't recognize. He answered, Mr. Vale? A woman's voice, professional and precise. This is Sarah Chen from the district attorney's office. We need you to come in for questioning regarding irregularities in several of your business accounts. On what grounds? We've received documentation suggesting financial fraud, money laundering, and several other charges I'd prefer to discuss in person. I have lawyers for this. Your lawyers have already been contacted. They're recommending you cooperate fully. The documentation we've received is quite comprehensive. Whoever provided it clearly had intimate knowledge of your operations. Elena. I'll have my lawyers contact you, Dominic said, and ended the call. But even as he said it, he knew it wouldn't matter. Elena hadn't just taken his money, she'd taken his protection, his power, his entire carefully constructed shield against consequences. She'd taken everything, and she'd done it so quietly, so carefully, so invisibly, that he'd never seen it coming. The sun rose over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like watching the walls close in, like seeing the end approaching in slow motion. Dominic's phone buzzed one final time. Not a text, an email. No sender name, no subject line, just a single sentence in the body. You had 22 chances to stop this. You chose silence. Now silence is all you'll have. He read it 3 times before he understood. Elena wasn't coming back. Elena wasn't negotiating. Elena was already gone, already free, already somewhere he'd never find her. And Dominic Vale, the man who'd built an empire on fear and blood, the man who'd thought himself untouchable, was standing in an empty office, watching his kingdom crumble, finally understanding what 8 years of being invisible felt like. The silence was deafening, and it was only just beginning. The first domino fell at 6:47 a.m. Dominic was still standing in his empty office, Elena's final email burning in his mind when his phone erupted with incoming calls. Not 1 or 2, a cascade of them, lighting up his screen like a slot machine paying out in disaster. Victor Russo, Thomas Harrigan, the bank, another bank, the accountant, He answered Victor's call first. "They hit the warehouse in Red Hook," Victor said without greeting. His voice had the flat, controlled tone of a man delivering news about a terminal diagnosis. Police raid, federal agents, they knew exactly where everything was, exactly what to look for, down to which false walls hid the product and which shipping containers were clean. Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. "How much did we lose?" "Everything. 12 million in product gone. But that's not the worst part." Victor paused. "They arrested Mickey Chen and 4 of his crew. And Mickey's talking. Mickey doesn't talk. Mickey's looking at 25 to life on trafficking charges. Someone provided the feds with documentation that ties him directly to 3 years of shipments. Dates, amounts, routes, everything. His lawyer says the evidence is airtight." "What kind of documentation?" "The kind that only exists in our private files. The kind that was stored on encrypted servers in your office. The kind that—" Victor stopped. "The kind that your wife apparently copied before she disappeared." Dominic moved to his desk chair and sat down heavily. Outside the window, the city was waking up. Delivery trucks on the streets, lights coming on in office windows. The ordinary machinery of an ordinary day. Nothing felt ordinary anymore. "How bad is it?" he asked. "I've got guys calling from 6 different operations, all reporting the same thing. Raids, arrests, files leaked. It's coordinated, boss. Someone gave law enforcement a roadmap to everything we do. Elena doesn't know about the operations side. She never—" Dominic stopped, realizing how absurd the statement sounded even as he said it. "She never asked about it." "She didn't need to ask," Victor said quietly. "She just needed access to your files, which you gave her 8 years ago." The second call came from Thomas Harrigan. "I need you to listen very carefully," the lawyer said. His voice had the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. "The DA's office has enough documentation to indict you on 17 separate charges: money laundering, tax evasion, wire fraud, RICO violations, and those are just the ones I know about." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on 8 years of meticulously organized financial records that someone provided them. Records that track every illegal dollar you've ever moved, every shell company you've ever used, every bribe you've ever paid. Dominic, whoever compiled this documentation understood your entire operation better than you do." Dominic closed his eyes. Saw Elena in her study, working late into the night. Elena with her spreadsheets and filing systems. Elena who never complained about the work, never asked what it was for, never questioned why certain accounts needed to be kept separate from others. Elena, who'd been building a case against him for 8 years. "How long do I have?" he asked. "Hours, maybe less. They're building an arrest warrant now. I'm trying to negotiate terms for you to surrender voluntarily, but Dominic, they don't want to negotiate. They think they've got you cold. They don't have anything without Elena's testimony. They don't need her testimony. She gave them documents, physical evidence, the kind of evidence that stands up in court whether the witness appears or not." Thomas exhaled slowly. "Where is she?" "I don't know." "Find her, because she's the only one who can make this go away." But Elena didn't want it to go away. Elena wanted exactly this. Dominic cornered, exposed, facing consequences he'd avoided for years. The third call came from Judge Raymond Porter, a man Dominic had kept on his payroll for the better part of 5 years. Don't call this number again, Porter said immediately. Raymond, listen. No, you listen. Someone leaked files, names, dates, amounts. Every payment I've ever taken from you is documented. My career is over. My marriage is probably over. My freedom is in question. And you want to know the worst part? The files are organized so well that prosecutors won't even have to work hard to use them. It's all there. Labeled, cross-referenced, perfect. I can fix this. You can't fix this. No one can fix this. Do you understand what she did? Your wife, your quiet, invisible wife, she didn't just burn you. She burned everyone connected to you. Every judge, every cop, every politician who ever took your money. We're all exposed. We're all done. Raymond, don't call me. Don't contact me. And if you're smart, you'll disappear before they come for you. Because when they do come, they're bringing everything. The call ended. Dominic sat in the growing light of dawn and felt his empire crumbling in real time. Not slowly, not gradually, but with the swift, brutal efficiency of a controlled demolition. His phone rang again. City Councilman Marcus Webb, another man on Dominic's payroll. I just got a visit from the FBI, Webb said. His voice shook. They have records of every payment, every favor, every vote I killed for you. They showed me spreadsheets, Dominic. Spreadsheets with my name on them, with dates and amounts and… Jesus Christ, she even included notes about what each payment was for. Marcus, calm down. Calm down. My political career is over. My reputation is destroyed. They're talking about corruption charges, bribery, conspiracy. Webb's voice cracked. How could you let this happen? I didn't let anything happen. You gave her access. You let your wife waltz into your operation and copy everything. Do you have any idea how incompetent that makes you look? How incompetent it makes all of us look. I'm working on fixing it. There's nothing to fix. She won. Don't you get it? She systematically destroyed everything you built, and she did it so cleanly that there's no way back. The only question now is how many of us go to prison. Marcus ended the call. Dominic's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the desk, tried to steady his breathing, tried to think through the chaos. Elena had access to the financial files. He'd known that. She managed the household accounts, the legitimate business accounts, some of the investment portfolios. But the illegal operations, the bribes and payoffs, the documentation of crimes? He'd never told her about those, which meant she'd found them on her own, which meant she'd been digging through his files for years, probably. Learning his systems, memorizing his passwords, understanding his operation better than he understood it himself. The phone rang again. Another call. Another domino falling. Detective Sarah Chen from the DA's office called back. Mr. Vale, I strongly suggest you come in voluntarily. We have agents en route to your office and your home. This will go much easier if you cooperate. I want to speak to my lawyer first. Your lawyer has already been informed. He's waiting for you at our office. I'm not going anywhere until… Mr. Vale, we have documentation of 17 different criminal enterprises. We have financial records spanning 8 years. We have testimony from 3 people who've already agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. This is happening whether you participate or not. The only question is how difficult you want to make it. Dominic ended the call without responding. He needed to think, needed to plan, needed to figure out how Elena had done this and how he could undo it. But before he could formulate a coherent thought, the elevator dinged in the hallway outside his office. Footsteps. Multiple sets. The door opened without a knock. 6 federal agents and FBI windbreakers entered his office with practiced efficiency. Behind them, Detective Chen, looking grimly satisfied. Dominic Vale, she said formally, you're under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit… I know my rights, Dominic interrupted, and I'm invoking them. I want my lawyer. He's already been contacted. They cuffed him, metal cold against his wrists, clicking shut with a finality that echoed in the empty room. As they led him toward the elevator, Dominic caught his reflection in the glass wall of his office. He looked exactly like what he was. A man who'd built everything on a foundation of sand and arrogance, watching it all wash away. The perp walk through the lobby was designed for maximum humiliation. Morning employees arriving for work stopped and stared. Security guards who'd greeted him respectfully for years now looked away. The cameras outside, news crews who'd somehow been tipped off to his arrest, flashed and clicked like hungry predators. They put him in the back of an unmarked sedan. Detective Chen slid into the passenger seat while another agent drove. "You want to tell us where your wife is?" Chen asked conversationally. "I want to speak to my lawyer." "That's your right. But just so you know, we don't actually need her. She gave us everything we need to put you away for 25 years minimum. Financial records, digital trails, witness statements she collected over the years. It's the most thorough case I've seen in 15 years with the DA's office." "Then why do you want to find her?" Chen turned in her seat to look at him.
Because
"Because we want to know how a woman with no legal training, no law enforcement background, and no apparent connection to any criminal enterprise managed to build a case this airtight. We want to know how she did it, and we want to know why she waited 8 years. Dominic looked out the window at the city passing by. "If you figure it out, let me know." The processing took 3 hours. Fingerprints. Photographs. Questions he refused to answer without his lawyer present. They put him in a holding cell that smelled of disinfectant and desperation and left him there to wait. Thomas Harrigan arrived just before noon. They gave them a private room, a small windowless space with a metal table and 2 chairs. Thomas set his briefcase down with a heavy thud. "They've got you," he said without preamble. "I've reviewed the evidence they're willing to share. It's comprehensive, devastating, organized with a level of detail that suggests years of preparation. Can you fight it?" "I can try. But Dominic, we need to be realistic here. They have documentation that you yourself created and stored. They have financial records with your signature. They have communications you sent. Elena didn't fabricate evidence. She just compiled what already existed and presented it in a way that makes prosecution almost trivial." Dominic's jaw clenched. "What are my options?" "Realistically, you can fight this and probably lose, which means 25 to 30 years. Or you can cooperate, provide information on your associates, and maybe get that reduced to 15. I'm not cooperating. Then you're looking at spending the rest of your productive life in prison." "There has to be another option." Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out a file. "There is one possibility. If we can prove that Elena coerced you, manipulated you, or that you were unaware of the extent of the illegal activities, no one will believe that." "Probably not, but it's the only defense I can think of that doesn't involve you turning on everyone who's ever worked for you." Thomas paused. "We could also argue that she violated attorney-client privilege by accessing confidential files, that the evidence was obtained illegally. She was my wife. I gave her access." "Did you give her access to incriminate yourself?" "I gave her access to manage the household, to handle correspondence, to—" Dominic stopped. "I never specifically authorized her to access criminal files." "Did you specifically prohibit it?" "No." "Did you password protect sensitive information?" "Yes, but—" Dominic closed his eyes. "But I kept a master list of passwords, in case I forgot them. She probably found it." "Where did you keep this list?" "In my desk drawer, at home." Thomas rubbed his temples. "So your defense is that you kept a list of passwords to your criminal enterprises in an unlocked desk drawer in a house you shared with your wife, and you're surprised she found it." When he put it that way, it sounded insane. "I trusted her," Dominic said quietly. "You ignored her," Thomas corrected. "There's a difference. Trust implies attention. You just assumed she wouldn't betray you because you'd never bothered to consider her capable of it." The words landed like physical blows. "Can you get me out on bail?" "I'm trying, but given the flight risk and the severity of charges—" Thomas shook his head. "You'll probably be held pending trial." "I'm sorry, Dominic, I really am. But Elena didn't just outplay you, she destroyed the board." They took him back to the holding cell. Hours passed. The afternoon faded into evening. Through the small window high on the wall, Dominic watched the light change from gold to amber to gray. His phone, confiscated during processing, sat somewhere in an evidence locker. But even if he'd had it, who would he call? His associates were all scrambling to save themselves. His political connections were severing ties. His empire was collapsing so quickly he could almost hear it. The sound of dominoes falling, one after another in perfect sequence. Elena had planned this. Not impulsively, not in a moment of anger. She'd spent 8 years methodically learning every detail of his operation, copying every file, documenting every crime, and then she'd waited for exactly the right moment to release it all. 22 calls tonight, 22 chances to answer. If he'd just picked up the phone, would she have stopped? Would she have given him a warning? One last opportunity to see her, to acknowledge her, to treat her like something more than furniture? Or had she been past that point already? Had those 22 calls been a test she knew he'd fail? The cell door opened. A guard gestured for him to follow. They led him to another room, larger this time, with a phone on the table and a two-way mirror on the wall. "You have a call," the guard said. 5 minutes. Dominic picked up the receiver. "Hello? Hello, Dominic?" Elena's voice, calm, clear, completely devoid of emotion. His hand tightened on the phone. "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll never find me." "Elena, listen to me." "No." "You listen." Her voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It just settled into the tone of someone delivering a prepared statement. "By now you've realized what I took. Money, files, protection, everything that made you powerful. You don't understand what you've done. I understand perfectly. I've dismantled your empire. I've exposed your crimes. I've ensured that everyone who enabled you will face consequences. And I did it with information you gave me access to, using systems you taught me to operate, following patterns you established over 8 years of ignoring my existence. People will come after you. Dangerous people. People who've lost everything because of what you did. Let them try." There was something cold in her voice now. "I've been invisible for 8 years, Dominic. I know how to disappear. But you were always so loud, so visible, so certain everyone was watching you. You never learned how to hide, and now you can't. What do you want from me?" "I want you to confess." The words hung in the air between them. Confess to what? The murder of Anthony Castellano, March 15th, 2019. You shot him twice in the chest and once in the head, then had Victor Russo dispose of the body in the Hudson River. Confess to that, and I'll give you a chance to survive. Dominic's blood went cold. How do I know? Because you came home that night at 3 a.m. with blood on your shirt cuff. Because you burned your clothes in the backyard. Because Victor called you 17 times in the following week, always from burner phones, always agitated. Because I'm not an idiot, Dominic. I'm just invisible, and invisible people see everything. I'm not confessing to murder. Then you'll lose everything anyway. The money's already gone, locked in accounts you can't access, converted to assets you can't trace. The files are with law enforcement. Your associates are turning on you. Your political protection has evaporated. You have nothing left to bargain with. I have you, Dominic said. You're my wife. You can be compelled to testify. Elena laughed, a sound he'd never heard from her before. It was neither warm nor cold, just empty. I can't be compelled to testify if no one can find me, and I can't be found if I don't exist. What does that mean? It means Elena Vale died yesterday. Paperwork filed, death certificate issued, a Jane Doe in the morgue with no fingerprints and dental records that match mine. As far as the world is concerned, I'm gone. And the woman on this phone? She's no one. A ghost. A phantom. A memory you can't quite grasp. Dominic's mind raced. You faked your death? I did what I needed to do to be free. Confess to the Castellano murder, Dominic. Go to prison for a crime you actually committed instead of drowning in all the evidence I provided. At least that way you'll have some dignity. And if I refuse, then you'll be tried for 17 different crimes, convicted of most of them, and spend the next 30 years in a federal prison while your empire gets divided up by rivals who smell blood in the water. Either way, you lose. But this way, you lose with honor. There's no honor in confessing to murder. There's no honor in what you've been doing for the past 8 years either. At least this way, you face consequences for something real. Dominic pressed his forehead against the cool metal table. Why are you doing this? Because 22 calls, Dominic. 22 times I reached out. 22 chances you had to see me, to notice me. To remember I existed. Her voice finally showed emotion. Not anger, but something worse. Disappointment. You couldn't even answer the phone, so I stopped calling, and when I stopped calling, your entire world fell apart. Do you understand what that means? Tell me. It means I wasn't the invisible one. You were. You were so busy being loud and powerful and feared that you never noticed the real power was in the silence. Was in the woman who managed your accounts and organized your files and made sure everything ran smoothly. I was the system, Dominic. And systems, when they shut down, take everything with them. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Elena spoke again, and her voice had returned to that terrible calm. You have 48 hours to decide. Confess to Castellano's murder or face trial for everything else. Choose wisely. Elena. The line went dead. Dominic sat holding the receiver long after the dial tone started. A guard eventually came and took him back to his cell, where he spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to process what his wife had become. Or maybe what she'd always been, and he'd just never noticed. The bail hearing came at 10 o'clock the next morning. Dominic sat in the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent and other men's desperation. His hands were cuffed in front of him, the metal cutting into his wrists every time he moved. Thomas Harrigan sat beside him in a $5,000 suit, looking like he was attending a funeral for his own career. Judge Margaret Whitmore presided, a woman Dominic had never paid off, never influenced, never even met. That alone told him how carefully Elena had planned this. She'd made sure his case landed with someone who owed him nothing. The prosecutor was a young woman named Jennifer Martinez, hungry and sharp in the way of people who'd grown up with something to prove. She stood when the judge called the case, her voice clear and confident. Your Honor, the state opposes bail. Mr. Vale is a significant flight risk given his substantial financial resources and international connections. He also poses a danger to the community and to potential witnesses. Thomas stood. Your Honor, Mr. Vale has deep ties to this community. He's lived here for 15 years, owns multiple properties, runs several legitimate businesses. He also ran several illegitimate businesses, Martinez interrupted. Businesses that trafficked in drugs, extortion, and violence. We have documentation showing Mr. Vale ordered assaults on competitors, bribed public officials, and laundered over $200 million through various shell companies. Alleged documentation, Thomas corrected. None of which has been authenticated or verified. Martinez smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. We have 8 years of financial records, all meticulously organized and cross-referenced. We have emails with Mr. Vale's verified signature. We have bank statements, wire transfers, and transaction logs that create an undeniable paper trail. The documentation doesn't need authentication because Mr. Vale created it himself. Judge Whitmore looked at Dominic over her reading glasses. Mr. Vale, do you have anything to say? Dominic started to speak, but Thomas put a hand on his arm. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence and looks forward to proving it at trial. That's not what I asked. Whitmore's gaze didn't waver. I asked if he has anything to say. Not his lawyer, him. The courtroom went quiet. Dominic could feel eyes on him. Journalists, court observers, probably a few of his former associates who'd come to watch him fall. I didn't do what they're accusing me of, he said finally. Which part? Whitmore asked. The money laundering, the bribery, the racketeering? You're facing 17 different charges, Mr. Vale. Are you claiming innocence on all of them? I'm claiming my right to a fair trial, and you'll get one, but that doesn't mean you get to walk free while we prepare for it. Whitmore looked at the papers in front of her. Bail is denied, Mr. Vale will remain in custody pending trial. Next case. The gavel came down with a sound like a door slamming shut. They took him back to the holding facility, a gray, cheerless place where men waited for their lives to be decided by people who'd never met them. Dominic's cell was 8 by 10, with a metal cot, a toilet, and a small window that looked out at a brick wall. This was his world now. This concrete box. This absence of everything he'd built. Thomas visited that afternoon. He looked tired, like he'd aged 5 years in the past 24 hours. I need you to be honest with me, he said, sitting across from Dominic in the visitor's room. Did you kill Anthony Castellano? Where's this coming from? From the fact that your wife apparently knows about it. And if she knows about it, she might have evidence. And if she has evidence, the DA's office will eventually get it too. Dominic looked at his hands. They were clean now, but he remembered them covered in blood. March 15th, 2019. Anthony Castellano had been skimming from shipments, thinking Dominic wouldn't notice, thinking he was clever enough to steal without consequences. He'd been wrong. If you did kill him, Thomas continued carefully, we need to get ahead of it. Build a defense before they bring charges. They don't have a body. They don't need a body if they have enough circumstantial evidence. Your wife seems to have everything else. Why wouldn't she have this too? Because she wasn't there. She didn't see anything. Are you sure? You said she was invisible. Invisible people see things others don't. Dominic thought about that night. Coming home at 3 a.m, blood on his cuff despite his attempts to clean up. He'd burned the clothes, showered, changed. Had Elena been awake? He'd assumed she was asleep, but then he'd assumed a lot of things about Elena that turned out to be wrong. I need to know what we're dealing with, Thomas pressed. Because if she recorded something, if she saved evidence, if she documented it the way she documented everything else, she couldn't have. There's nothing to document. It was clean. Except for the blood on your shirt. Except for Victor's 17 phone calls. Except for whatever else she noticed that you thought she didn't see. Thomas leaned forward. Dominic, I'm trying to help you, but I can't do that if you won't tell me the truth. The truth is that Elena has nothing. She's bluffing, trying to get me to confess to something she can't prove. Or she's giving you a choice, prison for murder, which carries a finite sentence if you cooperate, versus prison for everything else, which could mean you die behind bars. Dominic stood abruptly. The guard in the corner tensed, hand moving toward his weapon. I'm not confessing to anything, Dominic said. Tell Elena, if you can find her, that I'm calling her bluff. Thomas gathered his papers slowly. I hope you're right, because if you're wrong, you're not just gambling with your freedom. You're gambling with whatever's left of your life. The next 48 hours moved like sludge. Dominic spent them in his cell, watching the light change through the small window, trying to think of a way out of the trap Elena had constructed. But every angle he examined led to a dead end. The money was gone, locked in accounts he couldn't access. His political protection had evaporated. Every official he'd ever bribed was now scrambling to save themselves. His crew was fragmenting. Victor had already started distancing himself, probably preparing to flip for a deal. And Elena was a ghost. Legally dead. Physically gone. Impossible to find, impossible to threaten, impossible to negotiate with. She'd thought of everything. On the third morning, a guard came to his cell with a message. You've got a visitor, says she's your sister. Dominic didn't have a sister. They took him to a private visiting room, not the usual area with phones and glass partitions, but a small conference room reserved for attorney visits. A woman sat at the table with her back to the door, dark hair pulled into a severe bun, expensive suit, posture that suggested complete control. When she turned, Dominic's breath caught. It wasn't Elena, but it looked enough like her. Same height, same build, same careful composure, that for a moment his brain couldn't process the difference. Hello, Dominic, the woman said. Her voice was nothing like Elena's, sharper, more aggressive. My name is Rebecca Stern. I'm an attorney, though I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here to deliver a message from someone you used to know. Elena sent you. Elena is dead, remember? Death certificate filed, body in the morgue. I'm here on behalf of a client who prefers to remain anonymous. Rebecca opened a briefcase and pulled out a tablet. My client asked me to show you something, proof that her offer is genuine. She turned the tablet toward him. The screen showed a video file. Dominic's own mansion, filmed from what looked like a hidden camera in the living room. The timestamp read March 15th, 2019, 3:17 a.m. Rebecca pressed play. On screen, Dominic entered through the front door. His shirt was splattered with blood. His hands shook as he locked the door behind him. He moved through the living room quickly, heading toward the stairs. Then he stopped, turned, looked directly at the camera. No, not at the camera, at something near the camera, Someone. The angle shifted slightly, and Dominic saw himself in profile now. And there, in the corner of the frame, partially obscured by shadow, Elena, standing perfectly still, watching. On screen, Dominic spoke. "What are you doing awake?" Elena's voice so quiet it was almost inaudible. "I heard you come in." "Go back to bed." "You're bleeding." "It's not my blood." A pause. Then, "Whose is it?" On screen, Dominic's face hardened. "Someone who won't be a problem anymore. Go to bed, Elena, and forget you saw anything." Present day. Dominic watched himself walk up the stairs, leaving Elena standing in the shadows. The video continued. Elena stood there for a long moment, not moving. Then she walked to where Dominic had been standing, looked down at the floor. The camera angle shifted again, and Dominic could see what she was looking at. Drops of blood on the marble tile. Elena pulled out her phone, took photographs. Clear, well-lit photographs that showed the blood, the timestamp, the location. Then she cleaned it up. Every drop, methodically, efficiently, like it had never been there. Rebecca stopped the video. "My client has 17 more videos like this," she said calmly. "Moments you thought were private, conversations you thought no one heard, evidence you thought you'd destroyed. She was always watching, Dominic. You just never noticed." Dominic's mouth had gone dry. "That's illegal. Recording someone without their knowledge is inadmissible in some contexts, yes, but my client isn't planning to use these in court. She's planning to use them as leverage. Confess to the Castellano murder, and these videos disappear. Refuse, and they get delivered to the DA's office, along with documentation showing where the body is buried." "She doesn't know where the body is." Rebecca smiled. "Victor Russo dumped it near the industrial pier in Red Hook, weighted down with chains from a construction site you owned. The chains had serial numbers that trace back to your company. The pier has security cameras that stopped working that night, something my client found curious. She spent 3 years piecing together exactly what happened, and now she knows." The room tilted. Dominic gripped the edge of the table. "How?" he managed to ask. "Because she learned from you. You taught her how to be invisible, how to gather information without being noticed, how to build a case piece by piece until the picture becomes undeniable. She just applied those lessons better than you ever did." "What does she want?" "I already told you. A confession, signed and witnessed. You admit to killing Anthony Castellano. You provide details only the killer would know. And in exchange, my client makes certain guarantees." "What guarantees?" Rebecca pulled out a document. "First, the videos stay private. They never see the light of day. Second, my client provides information that helps you negotiate a better sentence, cooperation credit without actually giving up your associates. Third, the money stays gone, but your legal fees get paid. You won't die broke. And if I refuse? Then every video, every photograph, every piece of documentation goes to law enforcement. They build a murder case on top of the 17 charges you're already facing. Your sentence goes from 25 years to life without parole, and you spend whatever remains of your existence knowing that you could have chosen differently." Dominic looked at the frozen image on the tablet. Elena's face, half in shadow, watching him with an expression he'd never seen before. Not fear, not submission, just cold, careful observation. She'd been planning this for years. Not months, years. Every night he'd ignored her, every call he hadn't returned, every moment he'd treated her like furniture. She'd been gathering evidence, building her case, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "I need time to think," he said. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, the offer expires, and the videos go public." Rebecca stood, closing her briefcase with a decisive snap. "My client wanted me to tell you something else. She said you had 22 chances to stop this, 22 calls. If you'd answered even one of them, she might have reconsidered. But you didn't, so now you get one chance. One choice. Make it count." She left without another word. Dominic sat alone in the visiting room for a long time, staring at nothing. A guard eventually came to take him back to his cell, where he spent the night weighing his options. Confess to murder or risk life in prison. Admit to something he actually did, or face consequences for everything Elena had documented. Choose the devil, he knew, or gamble on a trial he'd probably lose. By morning, he still hadn't decided. Thomas arrived at 9 o'clock, looking grim. The DA just added murder charges to your indictment. Dominic's stomach dropped. How? Anonymous tip. Someone provided them with enough information to get a search warrant for the Red Hook Pier. They found a body yesterday afternoon. Male, mid-40s, dental records match Anthony Castellano. Cause of death, 3 gunshot wounds, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. They can't prove I did it. They're working on it. And Dominic, Thomas paused. Victor Russo was arrested this morning. He's already negotiating a deal. If he testifies against you, Victor won't talk. Victor's looking at accessory to murder charges. He'll talk. Everyone talks eventually. Dominic's hands clenched into fists. Elena did this. She's forcing my hand. Then maybe you should take her deal. If she's offering you a way out, it's not a way out. It's a trap. It's a choice, Thomas corrected. A bad one, granted, but it's better than no choice at all. But Dominic had spent 20 years making choices, building an empire, taking what he wanted, eliminating anyone who stood in his way. The idea of surrender, of letting Elena dictate his fate, felt like swallowing glass. Set up a meeting, he said finally, with Rebecca Stern. Tell her I want to talk. Rebecca came that afternoon. Same suit, same controlled demeanor, same briefcase full of evidence that could destroy what remained of his life. I'm listening, Dominic said. The offer stands. Confession for the Castellano murder. Cooperation with prosecution. In exchange, my client provides mitigating information and pays your legal expenses. I want to speak to Elena directly. That's not possible. Why not? Because my client values her privacy. And because there's nothing to discuss. The terms are clear. Accept or decline. Dominic leaned forward. Tell your client that I have information too. Things she doesn't know. Things that could hurt people she cares about. Rebecca's expression didn't change. My client doesn't care about anyone. You made sure of that over 8 years of neglect. Threats don't work on people who have nothing left to lose. Everyone has something to lose. Not her. She's legally dead, financially secure, geographically unknown. You can't threaten her family because you never asked if she had one. You can't threaten her friends because she never mentioned them. You made her invisible, Dominic, and now that invisibility is her greatest weapon. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. He didn't know anything about Elena. Not really. Not her history before they married, not her family, not her dreams or fears or weaknesses. He'd never asked, never cared. She was a ghost because he'd made her one. What if I fight this? He asked. What if I refuse to confess and take my chances at trial? Then you lose. The evidence is overwhelming. The witnesses are cooperating. The paper trail is perfect. You might delay the inevitable for a few months, but the outcome is certain. Rebecca pulled out another document. My client anticipated you'd be stubborn, so she asked me to show you something else. She slid the paper across the table. It was a detailed breakdown of his organization, every operation, every player, every connection, names, addresses, criminal histories, current locations, everything someone would need to completely dismantle what remained of his empire. This goes to your competitors if you refuse the deal, Rebecca said. The Russians, the Irish, the Italians, everyone who's ever wanted a piece of your territory. My client will hand them a roadmap to exactly how to take it. She'll start a war. She'll end one, your war, the one you've been waging for 20 years. And when it's over, there won't be anything left of the Vale Empire except stories people tell about the man who ignored his wife until she burned his kingdom to the ground. Dominic stared at the document, recognized names, saw vulnerabilities he'd spent years hiding. Elena had found them all. How long did this take her? He asked quietly. 8 years. Every day you ignored her, she learned something new. Every night you didn't come home, she dug a little deeper. You taught her patience, Dominic. You taught her how to wait, how to plan, how to strike when the moment was perfect. You just never imagined she'd use those lessons against you. She's destroying everything. No, you destroyed everything. She's just making sure everyone knows it. Rebecca stood. You have until midnight tonight. After that, the deal expires. The videos go to the DA. The breakdown goes to your competitors. And you spend the rest of your life watching everything you built get divided up by people who never feared you. Tell Elena I want to talk to her, face to face, one conversation, then I'll decide. She said you'd ask for that. She said no. Why? Because she spent 8 years trying to have a conversation with you. You were never interested. Why should she waste her time now? Rebecca gathered her things and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. My client wanted me to tell you something. She said to remember the first year of your marriage. She said you'll understand what she means. Then she was gone. Dominic sat alone in the visiting room, trying to remember. The first year. What happened the first year? They'd married quickly. A business arrangement more than a romance. Elena had been working as an accountant for one of his legitimate companies. Quiet, efficient, useful. He'd needed a wife for appearances, for the social circles he was trying to infiltrate. She'd needed security, or so he'd assumed. He'd never asked what she needed. The first year had been fine. Elena had managed the household, hosted dinners, made small talk with the wives of his associates. She'd been perfect in her role, invisible but present, useful but undemanding. And Dominic had ignored her, even then, even when the marriage was new and there might have been a chance for something real. He'd taught her to be invisible by treating her that way from the very beginning. The guard came to take him back to his cell. Dominic went without protest, his mind spinning through 8 years of moments he'd missed, conversations he'd avoided, calls he'd ignored, 22 chances, 22 moments where he could have chosen differently. And now he had one more choice, the last one Elena would ever give him: confess or lose everything. The question was whether he had any pride left worth protecting, or if Elena had already taken that too. Midnight came and went without Dominic making a decision. He lay on the thin mattress in his cell, staring at the ceiling where shadows from the hallway lights created shifting patterns that reminded him of nothing and everything. The deadline had passed. Rebecca Stern's ultimatum had expired, and still, Dominic hadn't signed the confession sitting on the small metal desk in the corner of his cell. Pride, he told himself. It was about pride. But deep down, in a place he didn't want to examine too closely, he knew it was something else. Signing that confession meant admitting Elena had won. Completely. Irrevocably. It meant acknowledging that the woman he'd dismissed as furniture for 8 years had dismantled him with surgical precision. It meant accepting that he'd never been as powerful as he thought. The morning brought consequences. Thomas arrived at 7, his face the color of old concrete. He didn't bother sitting down, just stood on the other side of the plexiglass partition in the visitors area and stared at Dominic like he was looking at a corpse. They found Victor, Thomas said flatly. What do you mean they found him? I mean, someone gave your competitors his location. He was in a safe house in Queens, waiting for his lawyer to finalize his cooperation deal with the DA. The Irish got to him first. Thomas's voice cracked slightly. They found him this morning, tortured, beaten, shot twice in the head. Same signature as how you killed Castellano. The room went cold. I know you didn't. You've been in here. But someone wanted it to look like you did, or like your organization did. And now the DA thinks you ordered a hit from inside custody. They're adding witness tampering and conspiracy to commit murder to your charges. Elena. The name came out like poison. Probably. Or someone working for her. Either way, she kept her promise. She said if you didn't confess, she'd give your competitors the information they needed to dismantle your organization. Victor was just the first domino. She had him killed? She had him exposed. What happened after that? Thomas shrugged helplessly. You know how this works, Dominic. You've done it yourself. You find out where someone is hiding, you let the right people know, and nature takes its course. She didn't pull the trigger, she just made sure someone else would. Dominic's hands were shaking. Get me a phone, I need to talk to her. You can't. She's dead, remember? And even if she wasn't, she made it clear she's done talking. You had your chance. Multiple chances. You didn't take them. Then get me Rebecca Stern. I tried. She's not returning my calls. Dominic, I think the deal is off the table. I think Elena just moved to the next phase of whatever she's planning. What next phase? Thomas pulled out his phone and showed Dominic the screen. It displayed a news article from an hour ago. Organized Crime Summit. Rival families converge on New York. The Russians, the Irish, the Italians, they're all meeting today, probably to discuss how to carve up your territory now that you're locked up and your second-in-command is dead. Someone organized this meeting. Someone gave them reason to believe now is the time to strike. Elena can't control mob families. She doesn't have that kind of reach. She doesn't need to control them. She just needs to give them information, names, locations, vulnerabilities, everything she documented over the years. She turns your own intelligence against you, and they do the rest. Dominic slumped against the wall. Outside the small window of the visitor's room, he could see a slice of gray sky. The world continuing on without him, the empire he'd built being divided up like spoils of war. "How bad is it?" he asked. 4 of your warehouses were hit last night. The legitimate businesses are hemorrhaging money because key personnel are fleeing before they get caught up in whatever's coming. Your accounts, the ones Elena didn't drain, are frozen by law enforcement. You've got nothing left, Dominic. No money, no muscle, no protection. You're just a man in a cell waiting for a trial you can't win. I can still fight. With what? You don't have resources. You don't have allies. You don't even have a functioning organization anymore. Everyone who worked for you is either dead, arrested, or running for cover. Thomas's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry, I really am. But Elena didn't just outplay you. She ended the game. The guard knocked on the glass. Time was up. Thomas gathered his things slowly, like a man at a funeral. I'll keep trying to build a defense. But Dominic, start preparing yourself for the reality that you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. With or without the Castellano confession, the evidence against you is overwhelming. He left without waiting for a response. Dominic sat alone in the visitor's room long after Thomas departed. A different guard eventually came to escort him back to his cell, where the unsigned confession still sat on the desk, mocking him with its blank signature line. The afternoon brought more bad news. A guard delivered a package, a large manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note on expensive paper. The note read, "You should have answered the phone. E." Dominic stared at it for a long moment. Then he called for the guard. I need access to a computer. This is evidence relevant to my case. The guard looked skeptical, but eventually fetched a supervisor. An hour later, they set him up in a secure room with a laptop isolated from any network. A guard stood in the corner, watching. Dominic inserted the thumb drive. 1 folder. 22 files. He clicked on the first one. It was a video, timestamped from 6 years ago. Elena sitting in her study, speaking directly to the camera. Her voice was calm, measured, completely controlled. This is documentation log number 1. Today is August 3rd, and I've decided to start recording everything. Not because I think anyone will ever see this, but because I need to remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. I need proof, even if it's just for myself, that I'm not crazy, that this is real, that I'm married to a man who's forgotten I exist. She paused, looking down at something off camera. When she looked back up, her eyes were dry but distant. Dominic didn't come home again last night. That's the 4th time this week. I know where he is. I always know where he is because I manage his calendar, his phone records, his credit card statements. He's with her. Simone, the woman he thinks I don't know about, the woman he's been seeing for 3 years. Another pause. I could confront him. I could demand answers. I could leave. But what would that accomplish? He doesn't love me. He never loved me. This marriage was always a transaction. I just forgot that somewhere along the way. I forgot that I was hired for a job, not chosen for a partnership. Elena's face hardened slightly. So I'm going to do my job, better than he ever imagined. I'm going to manage his empire so efficiently, so completely, that he won't even notice I'm building an exit strategy at the same time. Every file I organize, I'll copy. Every password I'm given, I'll document. Every conversation I overhear, I'll record. And when the time is right, when I have everything I need, I'll walk away. And he'll finally understand what it means to be invisible. The video ended. Dominic sat frozen, staring at the black screen. He clicked on the second video. Same setup, different date. Elena cataloging another night alone, Another instance of being ignored, another moment that pushed her further down the path toward his destruction. He clicked through all 22 videos, watched 8 years of careful documentation, saw himself through Elena's eyes, distant, dismissive, cruelly indifferent, heard her voice evolve from hurt to resignation to cold determination. Each video corresponded to a moment he'd ignored her, a birthday he'd forgotten, an anniversary he'd missed, a dinner she'd made that he never came home to eat. Small moments that accumulated into an avalanche of evidence that he'd never seen her as human. The last video was dated 2 days ago, the night of the 22 calls. Elena looked older in this one, not in years, but in the way trauma ages people from the inside out. Her eyes held something that might have been sadness or might have been satisfaction. Probably both. "This is the last log," she said. "In a few hours, I'm going to call Dominic 22 times. One call for each of these videos, one chance for each year of documentation. I already know he won't answer. He never answers, but I need to give him the opportunity. I need to know that I tried everything before I burned his world to the ground." She looked directly at the camera. "If you're watching this, Dominic, it means you didn't answer. It means you chose her over me one last time. It means you confirmed everything I've spent 8 years learning about you, that I was never a person to you, just a tool, just something useful until it wasn't." Her voice didn't waver. "I want you to know that I didn't do this out of anger. I did it out of necessity. You built an empire on blood and fear, and you used me to hold it together without ever acknowledging that's what you were doing. You made me complicit in your crimes while treating me like I was invisible. And that's the one thing I can't forgive. Not the cheating, not the neglect, but the way you made me part of something terrible and then pretended I didn't exist." Elena stood up, preparing to end the recording. "I'm leaving now. By the time you watch this, everything you own will be gone. Everyone you trust will have turned on you, and you'll be exactly what you made me, invisible, powerless, and alone. I hope it teaches you something, but I doubt it will. Men like you don't learn. They just fall." The screen went black. Dominic ejected the thumb drive with shaking hands. The guard in the corner was watching him carefully, probably wondering what he'd just seen. "I need to make a phone call," Dominic said. "You already used your phone privileges today. This is an emergency. No emergencies allowed. You can make another call tomorrow." Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Time slipping away like water through his fingers. Dominic returned to his cell, sat on the edge of his cot, looked at the unsigned confession. Elena had given him a choice: confess to Castellano's murder or face trial for everything else. He thought it was about control, about refusing to let her dictate his fate. But it wasn't about control. It was about consequences. For once in his life, facing actual consequences for something he'd actually done. He picked up the pen. His hand hovered over the signature line. 8 years. Elena had spent 8 years planning this. 8 years gathering evidence, documenting crimes, building a case that would destroy him. And in all that time, he'd never noticed. Never cared. Never bothered to see the woman who managed his life was also documenting his downfall. The pen touched paper, then stopped. Because signing this confession wouldn't change anything. Elena had already won. Whether he confessed or not, whether he cooperated or not, the outcome was the same. Prison, loss, the complete dismantling of everything he'd built. The only question was how much dignity he could salvage from the wreckage. He set the pen down, stood up, called for the guard. "I need to speak to my lawyer. Tell him I want to negotiate a meeting with someone who doesn't officially exist." The guard looked confused but relayed the message. Thomas called back an hour later. "What are you doing?" "I want to meet with Elena, face to face. No intermediaries, no lawyers, just the two of us." "She'll never agree to that." "Tell Rebecca Stern that I'll sign the confession, but only if Elena meets me first. One conversation. That's all I'm asking." "Dominic, just deliver the message." Thomas sighed. "I'll try, but don't get your hopes up. She's been 3 steps ahead of you this entire time. Why would she risk exposing herself now?" "Because she wants me to understand. That's what this has all been about. Making me see what I refused to see for 8 years. She won't be able to resist the opportunity to make sure I really get it. And if you're wrong, Then I signed the confession anyway and spend the rest of my life wondering what she would have said. The response came faster than expected. Rebecca Stern arrived that evening, looking simultaneously annoyed and impressed. My client has agreed to meet with you. Once, tomorrow afternoon. Maximum security facility, supervised visit, guards present. You get 30 minutes. After that, you sign the confession, or the deal is permanently off the table. Where? She'll come here. To the facility. But Dominic, Rebecca leaned forward slightly. She's doing this as a courtesy. One last chance for you to understand what you lost. Don't waste it by trying to threaten her or manipulate her. She's holding all the cards. You're holding nothing. I know. Do you? Because you've spent 20 years getting your way through intimidation and violence. That doesn't work anymore. You're powerless. She's free. Remember that when you're sitting across from her tomorrow. Rebecca left, and Dominic spent the night trying to figure out what he'd say. What words could possibly matter after 8 years of silence? What explanation could justify the way he'd treated her? None. There were no words, no excuses, no justification. But he had to try. The next afternoon, they brought him to a private meeting room he'd never seen before. It was smaller than the usual visitors area, with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs on opposite sides. A guard stood in each corner. A camera in the ceiling recorded everything. Dominic sat down and waited. The door opened. Elena walked in, and for a moment Dominic forgot how to breathe. She looked different, not dramatically. Same height, same build, same careful composure. But something fundamental had changed. She wore an expensive suit he'd never seen before. Her hair was cut shorter, styled differently. She moved with a confidence that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep inside her. She looked free. Elena sat down across from him without a word. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of coexistence. And this was the first time Dominic had really looked at her, really seen her. "Hello, Dominic," she said finally. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, quiet, controlled, giving nothing away. "Hello, Elena. You wanted to talk, so talk." Where to even begin? Dominic's carefully prepared words evaporated like morning fog. "Why?" he asked instead. "Why go through all of this? Why not just leave?" "Because leaving wouldn't have accomplished anything. You would have continued running your empire, hurting people, corrupting systems. Someone else would have managed your household and you'd never have learned anything. This way..." She gestured vaguely at the room, at his orange jumpsuit, at the guards watching their every move. "This way you understand consequences. I'm going to prison for the rest of my life." "Yes." "You destroyed everything I built." "Yes." "You don't seem bothered by that." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Should I be? You destroyed me first. Every day for 8 years you treated me like I was invisible, like I didn't matter, like my thoughts and feelings and existence were irrelevant. You killed who I was and expected me to keep serving you anyway. At least when I destroy you, you'll still be alive to learn from it. I never meant to..." "Yes, you did." Her voice sharpened. "Don't lie to yourself now. You meant every ignored call, every forgotten anniversary, every night you spent with another woman. You chose that, actively, every single day. You chose to make me invisible because it was convenient." Dominic's jaw clenched. "And this is revenge?" "No, this is justice. Revenge would be killing you. Justice is making sure you face legal consequences for illegal actions. I'm not destroying you out of spite, Dominic. I'm dismantling an empire built on blood because it should never have existed in the first place. You were part of that empire. You managed it. You helped it run. I was a prisoner in that empire. I managed it because you gave me no other role. And yes, I'm culpable. I should have left years ago. But I was young and scared, and I thought..." She paused. "I thought eventually you'd see me. That's how pathetic I was. I thought if I just did my job well enough, if I just managed things perfectly enough, you'd finally notice I existed as more than a tool." "Elena, 22 calls," she continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I gave you 22 chances to answer. Do you know how long I sat there listening to it ring, hoping you'd pick up? hoping that maybe, just this once, you'd choose me over her? I didn't know. You didn't care. There's a difference. Elena's eyes met his, and there was something ancient in her gaze, something that had learned patience through suffering. You didn't know because you never asked. About me, about my day, about what I wanted or needed or thought. In 8 years of marriage, you never once asked me how I was doing. The truth of it hit like a sledgehammer. I'm sorry, Dominic said. The words felt inadequate, tiny, meaningless, but they were all he had. I know you are. Now that you've lost everything, now that you're facing consequences. But where was that sorry 6 years ago, 5 years ago? The night of our anniversary when you didn't come home and I ate dinner alone for the 1,000th time. I can't change the past. No, you can't, but you can face it. That's why I'm here. Not to forgive you, not to reconcile, but to make sure you understand exactly what you lost. Tell me. Elena leaned back in her chair. You lost a partner who would have done anything for you. I wasn't just managing your household, Dominic. I was managing your life. Every detail you didn't want to bother with, I handled. Every problem you didn't want to think about, I solved. Every vulnerability in your operation, I identified and fixed. I made you successful, and you never noticed. I noticed you were good at your job. I wasn't your employee, I was your wife. Her voice cracked slightly. I wanted to be seen as your wife, not as staff, not as furniture, as someone you loved. I did. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't lie to me now. You married me because I was convenient, because I was useful, because I fit into your plans for social respectability. You never loved me. You barely liked me. I was just another asset in your portfolio. Dominic wanted to argue, wanted to say she was wrong, but sitting here looking at her across this metal table, he couldn't find the lie that would make it better, because she wasn't wrong. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. I want you to sign the confession. I want you to take responsibility for at least one of the terrible things you've done. And then I want you to spend the rest of your life thinking about all the other terrible things you got away with, all the people you hurt, all the lives you ruined, all the corruption you spread. I want you to sit in a cell and finally understand what it means to be powerless. And then nothing. I disappear. You rot. The empire dies, and maybe the city is a little bit safer without Dominic Vale's shadow hanging over it. You'll never be safe. My enemies will come after you. The families I dealt with, the people I crossed, they'll want revenge. Elena smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Let them try. I'm dead, remember? Elena Vale died. There's a body in the morgue, death certificate filed, all legal and official. The woman sitting across from you right now, she doesn't exist. No name, no history, no trail. I learned from the best how to disappear. I'll find you. No, you won't. Because in about 5 minutes, I'm walking out of this facility and you'll never see me again. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison wondering where I am, wondering what name I'm using, wondering if I'm happy. She leaned forward. And I will be. Happy. Free. Finally living the life I should have been living 8 years ago. The guard in the corner tapped his watch. Time was running out. Sign the confession, Dominic. Face consequences for your actions, and let me go. What if I don't? Then the murder charge gets added anyway based on the evidence I've already provided. The videos go to the DA. Your competitors get the full breakdown of your organization, and you die in prison knowing you could have chosen dignity but picked pride instead. Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, and saw clearly for the first time the woman he'd married and ignored. The woman who'd been strong enough to endure 8 years of neglect while planning his downfall. The woman who'd been invisible only because he refused to see her. I'm sorry, he said again, for everything, for all of it. You deserved better. Yes, I did. Elena stood. But sorry doesn't rebuild 8 years. It doesn't undo the damage. It's just a word you say when there's nothing left to say. She walked toward the door. Elena. She stopped but didn't turn around. In another life, if I'd been different, could we have been happy? She was quiet for a long moment, then softly. We'll never know. You made sure of that. The door closed behind her. Dominic sat alone in the room, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. A guard brought him the confession and a pen. He signed it. Not because Elena had forced him, not because he was out of options, but because she was right. For once in his life, he needed to face consequences for something he'd actually done. The pen scratched across paper. His signature, once a symbol of power and authority, now just an admission of guilt. When he finished, the guard took the document away. Dominic sat in the empty room and thought about 22 phone calls he'd never answered, 22 chances he'd missed, one woman he'd never really seen until she was gone. The confession changed everything and nothing. Within hours of signing, Dominic was transferred to a maximum security federal facility upstate. The media called it a shocking admission. Legal analysts debated whether it was a strategic move or genuine remorse. His former associates called it weakness. But none of that mattered anymore because the moment that pen left paper, Dominic Vale ceased to be a crime lord and became simply another inmate waiting for sentencing. The trial for the Castellano murder was perfunctory. With his signed confession, there was no need for drawn-out proceedings or dramatic revelations. The prosecutor presented the evidence. The confession, the recovered body, Victor Russo's testimony from beyond the grave in the form of recorded statements he'd given before his death. Dominic's lawyer mounted a half-hearted defense about coercion and mental duress, but everyone in the courtroom knew it was theater. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Morrison, who'd never taken a bribe in 30 years on the bench, sentenced him to 25 years to life. With the confession and cooperation credit that Elena's documentation had somehow provided, it was the best outcome Thomas could negotiate. The other 17 charges were rolled into a plea agreement. Dominic would serve his time quietly, and in exchange, the state wouldn't pursue maximum sentences that could have kept him locked up until he died of old age. 25 years to life. Dominic was 42 years old. If he lived that long, he'd be 67 when he became eligible for parole. An old man. Broken. Irrelevant. The transfer to permanent housing came 3 weeks after sentencing. They put him in a cell block with other high-profile inmates, men who'd once wielded power and now counted the days in 6x8 concrete boxes. The routine was numbing. Wake at 6, breakfast at 7, yard time at 9 if the weather permitted, lunch at noon, more waiting, dinner at 5, lights out at 10, days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Dominic stopped counting after the first 90 days. The news from the outside world filtered in through newspapers and the occasional television access. He watched his empire dissolve like sugar in water. The legitimate businesses were sold off piecemeal to pay legal fees and restitution. The illegal operations were carved up by rival families exactly as Elena had predicted. The Russians took the shipping routes. The Irish claimed the construction rackets. The Italians absorbed what was left of the street-level drug trade. Within 6 months, there was nothing left of the Vale organization except memories and case files. Judge Raymond Porter was disbarred and sentenced to 5 years for corruption. City Councilman Marcus Webb resigned in disgrace and fled to somewhere in South America. Detective Chen, no relation to his former housekeeper, got a promotion for bringing down one of the city's most entrenched criminal enterprises. She gave interviews about the anonymous tip that had started everything, praising the unknown whistleblower who'd provided 8 years of meticulously documented evidence. Elena's name was never mentioned, because Elena Vale was dead. Officially, legally, completely. Dominic thought about her constantly. In the morning, waking to gray walls instead of Egyptian cotton sheets, he thought about the breakfast she used to have prepared even though he rarely ate it. During yard time, walking in circles under razor wire and guard towers, he thought about the garden she'd maintained at the mansion, roses and lilies he'd never stopped to appreciate. At night, lying on a mattress that felt like concrete, he thought about the 8 years she'd spent invisible in his house, gathering the evidence that would destroy him. 3 months into his sentence, a letter arrived. It had no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, careful, controlled, revealing nothing about the sender. The prison screened it for contraband and threats before delivering it to his cell. Dominic opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single photograph and a brief note. The photograph showed a woman sitting at a cafe table somewhere sunny and European, Spain maybe, or southern France. She wore sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured most of her face, but Dominic recognized the curve of her jaw, the elegant way she held her coffee cup. Elena. Alive. Free. Somewhere beautiful. The note was written in the same unfamiliar handwriting. You're probably wondering if I'm happy. I am. You're probably wondering if I ever think about you. I don't. You were a chapter in my life that's closed now. A lesson learned, a mistake corrected. I'm writing this not because I want to reconnect or because I feel guilty. I'm writing because I want you to know that everything you lost, I gained. Every dollar you can't access, I'm investing in a future you'll never see. Every connection you severed, I'm building into something better. Every piece of power you wielded carelessly, I'm using deliberately. You taught me many things, Dominic, mostly what not to be. For that, I suppose I should thank you, but I won't, because you don't deserve gratitude for accidentally creating the weapon that destroyed you. This is the last time you'll hear from me. When you get out, if you get out, don't look for me. I'll be someone else entirely by then, living a life you can't imagine in a place you'll never find. Enjoy your cell. I'm enjoying my freedom. Someone you used to know. Dominic read the letter 17 times before the guard came to collect it for his file. Afterward, he sat on his bunk and tried to feel something. Anger, regret, loss. But all he felt was empty. Elena had won so completely that there was nothing left to fight over. The seasons changed outside his cell window. Summer heat gave way to autumn rain, gave way to winter cold. Dominic fell into the rhythm of prison life. Not because he accepted it, but because fighting it was exhausting and pointless. He worked in the kitchen, attended mandatory counseling sessions, avoided gang politics with the careful neutrality of someone who had nothing left to offer and nothing left to prove. Other inmates occasionally recognized him. The man who'd run half the city, the crime lord who'd been brought down by his own wife. They asked questions he didn't answer, made jokes he didn't acknowledge. Eventually, they left him alone. Even in prison, Dominic Vale was becoming invisible. 6 months turned into a year. During that time, the few visitors he had dwindled to almost none. Thomas came once a month initially, then every other month, then quarterly. Not because he didn't care, but because there was nothing left to discuss. The legal battles were over. The assets were liquidated. Dominic's future was sealed in concrete and razor wire. On the anniversary of his incarceration, Thomas brought news. The DA found something interesting, he said across the scratched plexiglass partition in the visitors' area. In all the documentation Elena provided, there were notes, recommendations, suggestions about which of your former associates had committed the worst crimes, which ones deserved the harshest sentences, which ones might be redeemable. She was playing prosecutor? More like playing justice system. She ranked everyone in your organization by culpability. The violent ones got full exposure. The ones who were just trying to survive got minimal documentation. She was surgical about it, Dominic, not vindictive, precise. What's your point? My point is that you were at the top of her list, not because you were the most violent, but because you had the most power and used it the most carelessly. She held you to a higher standard than everyone else, and when you failed to meet it, she made sure you faced appropriate consequences. Appropriate, Dominic laughed, a sound like glass breaking. She destroyed my life. She held you accountable for destroying other people's lives. There's a difference. Thomas leaned forward. I've spent the past year reviewing everything she compiled. It's remarkable, Dominic. She didn't just document crimes, she documented impact, how your drug trade affected neighborhoods, how your bribes corrupted civic institutions, how your violence traumatized communities. She made you see the human cost of your empire. I never asked to see it. That's exactly the problem. You never asked, never cared, never noticed. And Elena made sure that in the end, you'd have nothing to do but notice. Thomas left after 30 minutes. Visiting time was limited, and he had other clients who needed him more than Dominic did. Alone again, Dominic returned to his cell and thought about impact, about all the people he'd hurt without bothering to learn their names, about communities destroyed by the drugs he'd moved, about families torn apart by the violence he'd ordered, about systems corrupted by the money he'd spent. Elena had seen all of it. While he'd been building his empire, she'd been counting the cost. Year 2 brought a routine so familiar it felt like drowning in slow motion. Wake, eat, work, exercise, sleep, repeat. The sameness was its own kind of torture, not dramatic, not violent, just relentlessly monotonous. Dominic understood why some inmates preferred solitary confinement. At least there, the isolation was acknowledged. Out here, surrounded by hundreds of other prisoners, he'd never felt more alone. He started writing, not because he thought anyone would read it, but because the counselors suggested it might help process what he'd lost. At first, the words came slowly, fragmented thoughts about power and pride and the woman who'd dismantled him with patience he'd never possessed. But gradually, the writing became easier, more honest, more painful. He wrote about the first time he'd met Elena, a junior accountant at one of his legitimate businesses, quietly competent in a way that made her useful. He'd needed a wife for social appearances. She'd needed security and stability. The marriage had been transactional from the beginning, but somewhere in his writing, Dominic realized that didn't mean it had to stay that way. He could have chosen differently. Every day for 8 years, he could have chosen to see her, to talk to her, to treat her like a partner instead of an employee. He'd had 8 years of opportunities to build something real, and he'd squandered every single one because he was too focused on his empire to notice the foundation crumbling beneath his feet. The writing filled notebooks, stacks of them, confessions that would never be read, apologies that would never be delivered, understanding that came too late to matter. In his 3rd year, Dominic got a new cellmate, a younger man named Marcus Reed who'd been caught running a Ponzi scheme that had bilked investors out of $40 million. Marcus was angry in the way of people who believed they'd been caught unfairly, who thought they were smarter than the system that had finally caught up to them. "They only got me because someone on the inside flipped," Marcus complained during their first conversation. "Someone I trusted, someone who had access to everything and used it to destroy me." Dominic said nothing, just listened to Marcus rant about betrayal and injustice and how he'd get revenge someday. "You get it, right?" Marcus pressed. "I heard about you. Your wife took you down. That's gotta burn." "It did," Dominic admitted. At first, man, I'd never stop being angry. How could you trust someone with everything and have them destroy you like that?" "Because I never actually trusted her. I just assumed she'd stay loyal because I'd given her a comfortable life. That's not trust. That's arrogance." Marcus frowned. "You're defending her?" "No, I'm understanding her. There's a difference." Dominic sat on his bunk, looking at the young man who reminded him too much of his younger self. "You think you got caught because someone betrayed you. But the truth is, you got caught because you did something wrong and someone finally made you face consequences. That's not betrayal. That's justice. Justice. They took everything from me. You took everything from your investors first. All that person did was return the favor." Marcus turned away, muttering about how Dominic didn't understand. But Dominic understood perfectly. He'd been that angry once, that certain of his own righteousness, that convinced the world was wrong and he was right. Elena had cured him of that certainty. The 4th year brought unexpected news. Thomas arrived looking troubled, carrying a folder Dominic recognized from his trial. "The DA received another package," Thomas said without preamble. "More documentation from the anonymous source, but this time it wasn't about you." "What do you mean?" "It was about the rival families who took over your territory. The Russians, the Irish, the Italians. Whoever's been sending evidence, Elena presumably, just gave law enforcement everything they need to take down the organizations that replaced yours." Dominic felt something shift in his chest. "She's still documenting?" "Apparently. The package included financial records, surveillance photos, transaction logs, everything organized with the same meticulous attention to detail as the evidence against you. The DA thinks she's been tracking these families since your arrest, learning their operations, building cases against them." "Why would she do that?" Thomas shrugged. "Maybe she wasn't just trying to destroy you. Maybe she was trying to destroy the entire corrupt system. You were just the first domino." The implications settled slowly. Elena hadn't disappeared to live a quiet life of freedom. She'd disappeared to continue the work, taking down criminal enterprises one carefully documented case at a time, using the skills she'd developed during 8 years of managing Dominic's empire to dismantle every empire like it. Is she? Dominic stopped, unsure how to phrase the question. Is she safe? Going after these families, they'll hunt her if they figure out who she is. They won't figure it out. According to the DA, the documentation is so clean there's no way to trace it back to a source. No fingerprints, no digital trail, no witnesses. Whoever she is now, she's learned how to be completely invisible. After Thomas left, Dominic sat in his cell thinking about Elena's crusade. She could have taken the money and disappeared into comfortable obscurity. Instead, she was waging a quiet war against organized crime with nothing but patience and documentation. She'd become everything he'd pretended to be: powerful, strategic, genuinely making a difference. The irony wasn't lost on him. Year 5 brought the first serious parole consideration hearing, though everyone knew it was a formality. Dominic wouldn't be released after serving just 5 years of a 25-to-life sentence, but the hearing gave him an opportunity to speak, to show the parole board he understood what he'd done and why he deserved to remain incarcerated. He told them the truth, not the strategic truth designed to minimize his crimes, but the actual truth about building an empire on violence and corruption, about ignoring the human cost of his decisions, about treating people as tools instead of human beings, about learning too late that real power wasn't loud or violent or feared. Real power was quiet, patient, strategic, like Elena. The parole board denied his application unanimously. Dominic wasn't surprised or disappointed. He deserved to be exactly where he was. 6 years in, Dominic received a visitor he didn't recognize, a woman in her 60s, well-dressed, with kind eyes, and an expression that suggested she'd seen terrible things and chosen kindness anyway. "My name is Catherine Morrison," she said. "I'm a victim's advocate. I work with families affected by organized crime." "I don't have any family." "I'm not here about your family. I'm here about the families you hurt." Catherine pulled out a folder. "Over the past 6 years, I've been working with people whose lives were destroyed by the drug trade you ran. Parents who lost children to overdoses. Communities devastated by the violence your organization spread. I wanted you to see their faces, learn their names, understand the impact of your choices." She showed him photographs. A mother holding a picture of her teenage son who died from drugs Dominic had moved. A father standing in front of a house destroyed in gang warfare over Dominic's territory. A community organizer pointing to a neighborhood that looked like a war zone. "Why are you showing me this?" Dominic asked, his voice rough. "Because someone asked me to. Someone who believes you're capable of understanding what you did. Someone who thinks that understanding might lead to genuine change." "Elena," Catherine didn't confirm or deny, "I was asked to visit you once a year to show you the continued impact of your crimes, to make sure you don't forget why you're here." "I won't forget." "Good. Because these families can't forget either. They live with the consequences of your choices every day. The least you can do is witness their pain." Catherine visited every year after that, each time bringing new stories, new faces, new evidence of the destruction Dominic had caused. Each visit was harder than the last, but Dominic never refused to see her, never turned away from the photographs, never stopped learning the names of people he'd hurt. It was the least he could do. The very least. 7 years became 8. 8 became 9. Dominic aged in prison the way everyone does, not gracefully, but inevitably. Gray appeared in his hair. Lines deepened around his eyes. His body grew leaner, harder, shaped by prison routine and limited resources. But something else changed too. Something internal that was harder to quantify. The arrogance that had defined him for 42 years gradually eroded under the weight of enforced humility. The certainty that he'd been justified in his actions crumbled when confronted with evidence of their cost. The pride that had kept him from answering 22 phone calls dissolved into something that might have been wisdom or might have been surrender. Probably both. In his 10th year of incarceration, the news broke that the last of the major crime families in the city had been taken down. Federal raids. Dozens of arrests. Cases built on anonymous documentation that law enforcement described as the most comprehensive they'd ever seen. The media speculated about the mysterious whistleblower who'd spent a decade systematically dismantling organized crime in the city. Some called her a hero. Others questioned the legality of her methods. But no one could identify her. No one could find her. She was a ghost fighting ghosts. Dominic knew who she was, and he knew she'd finally finished the work she'd started the night she called him 22 times. Thomas visited a week after the final raids, looking older and more tired than Dominic had ever seen him. "It's over," Thomas said simply. "The entire criminal infrastructure you used to be part of, it's gone, dismantled, destroyed. And she did it with nothing but documentation and patience." "Is she safe now? With all the families taken down, can she finally rest?" "I don't know. I hope so. But Dominic—" Thomas paused. "I wanted to tell you something. The documentation she provided for those final raids included something interesting. Recommendations for rehabilitation programs for low-level offenders. Suggestions for community investment in neighborhoods damaged by the drug trade. Proposals for criminal justice reform that might prevent future organizations like yours from taking root. She's not just tearing down, she's building up." "Exactly. She spent 10 years destroying a corrupt system, and now she's trying to build something better in its place. She's everything you could have been if you'd chosen differently." The words should have stung. Instead, they just felt true. "Good," Dominic said quietly. "I'm glad she's using everything I taught her for something worthwhile." Thomas left, and Dominic returned to his cell. That night, he dreamed of Elena for the first time in months. In the dream, she was sitting in a cafe somewhere sunny, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. She looked peaceful, content, free. When he woke, Dominic realized he was smiling. The remaining years blurred together. Dominic settled into something that might have been acceptance or might have been defeat. He worked. He wrote. He met with Catherine Morrison and learned more names of people he'd hurt. He attended parole hearings he knew he'd fail. He existed in the space between punishment and redemption, never quite reaching either. On the 15th anniversary of his incarceration, a package arrived. No return address. No note. Just a book. It was a published memoir written by an anonymous author. The title, Invisible: How I Dismantled a Criminal Empire from the Inside. Dominic read it cover to cover in 2 days. The book told Elena's story, carefully anonymized, legally vetted, but unmistakably hers. 8 years of marriage to a crime lord who never saw her. 8 years of documentation and preparation. The decision to bring down not just one man, but an entire corrupt system. The decades spent systematically destroying every organization that had profited from violence and fear. The final chapter was titled, What Power Really Means. In it, the author wrote, "Real power isn't loud. It isn't violent. It isn't feared. Real power is the ability to change systems that seem unchangeable, to hold people accountable who thought they were untouchable, to build something better from the ashes of something terrible. My husband thought power meant controlling people through fear. I learned that power means freeing people from fear. He shouted, and the world trembled. I whispered, and the world changed. That's the difference between power that destroys and power that builds. Between power that demands attention and power that works in silence. He was the storm everyone saw coming. I was the erosion no one noticed until the foundation collapsed. In the end, we both got exactly what we deserved. He got consequences. I got freedom. And the city got a chance to heal from the damage men like him had caused for generations." Dominic closed the book and sat in his cell as the sun set outside his small window. Somewhere in the world, Elena was living under a different name, doing work that mattered, being the person she'd always been capable of becoming. And here he was, a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when power corrupts and arrogance blinds. He thought about the 22 calls he'd never answered, the 22 chances he'd squandered, the woman he'd never really seen until she'd already gone. In the gathering darkness, Dominic finally understood what Elena had been trying to teach him all along. That real strength is quiet. That genuine power doesn't need to announce itself. That the most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody notices. She'd been invisible because he'd refused to see her, but she'd been powerful all along. And when she'd finally chosen to act, to step out of the shadows he'd forced her into, she'd done it with a precision and patience that had destroyed him completely. 25 years to life. Dominic had served 15 so far. If he lived long enough, he might get parole at 67, might walk out of prison an old man with nothing waiting for him, no empire, no family, no legacy except a cautionary tale about a crime lord who'd been brought down by the wife he'd ignored. Or he might die here, in this cell. Invisible in his own way now, just another inmate who'd once been somebody and was now nobody. Either way, Elena had won. She'd won before the first domino fell, before the first call went unanswered, before he'd even realized there was a war being waged. Because the real war had never been loud, had never been visible, had never been the kind of conflict Dominic understood. It had been quiet, patient, strategic. It had been fought by a woman who'd learned that true power doesn't shout. It waits, it watches, and it strikes once. Dominic laid down on his bunk and closed his eyes. Outside, the world continued without him. Inside, he finally understood the lesson Elena had spent 8 years teaching. Power was never loud. It was the silence after 22 unanswered calls, the absence that reveals what was always there, the invisible woman who was the system all along. And in that understanding, Dominic Vale, the man who'd once controlled half a city through fear, finally found something resembling peace in accepting that he'd never been as powerful as the woman he'd failed to see. The lights went out at 10 o'clock, same as every night. And in the darkness, Dominic thought of Elena one last time. Free. Safe. Powerful in ways he'd never understood until it was far too late. He hoped she was happy. She'd certainly earned it.